Hello everyone, my name is Vicky DeRosa and welcome to All About Health. Today we're here with Kate Thomsen and Fatima Covino, and our topic today is resilience. I have been through a very serious genetic disease in the last 6 years, and I think it's an important topic. Fatima and I talked about this earlier today, and she thought it was important enough to talk about today. So what are your thoughts, Fatima? What would you like to start with?
Well, first let's define what resiliency is. From a psychological perspective, I'm always thinking psychological. I'm a psychotherapist, and I work with children, adolescents, families. And I think that the concept of resiliency is very important in both physical health and mental health, for a number of reasons. There's been a big move, I would say, probably in the past 25 years toward a more positive psychology. And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Seligman is kind of the father of positive psychology at University of Pennsylvania. And he's done a lot of great work on how resilient people are different than people who are not resilient. And resiliency is more of a process than a trait that a person has. It's a dynamic process. It's a process about the way that we adapt to things like adversity, illness. And we all have it to varying degrees, and we see that there are differences in people as far as how resilient they are in the face of adversity. And what comes to mind, especially with you, Vicky, is I remember you talking to me about being diagnosed with the Leber's disease. And being a mental health clinician, I walked away from that conversation thinking, wow, she must be in denial.
I remember.
Yeah.
I do remember.
Yeah, because I didn't see you on the floor crying and being devastated. So one of my responses was either she's in denial or she has Olympian strength to be dealing with this diagnosis. So I felt that you know, a conversation about resiliency is relevant, and it really is necessary. And if we can find a way to kind of beef up resiliency in people in general, I think you're going to have the result of better mental health and better physical health and better approach to nutrition and eating and a lifestyle in general. So
do you think that resiliency is a learned behavior? Do you think it's just one of those things that you're born with? What is your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are mixed camps regarding what that is. I believe that it's a combination of having the trait. I also believe that certainly it's something that you can learn and improve upon. And you know me, I like the cognitive behavior therapy as an approach to mental health treatment for depression, anxiety, and those type of disorders. So I think that if you can change the way people think about their adversity, their problems, their illness, that you certainly will have an effect on how well they do overall. So I believe it is part trait. I believe it is part learned. I think we all have the capacity to develop resiliency, but I also believe that it's a characterological thing, that some of us are born with more of it than others, just like temperament, personality may be different in people. I think that some people have more resiliency than others, certainly.
So strength, courage, determination, are those all traits that come out of resiliency? obviously.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly, there's still a lot of research being done. And don't forget, resiliency was a concept that came out probably in the 80s when psychologists were looking at underprivileged children, children who were brought up in poverty environments, children who were exposed to trauma, maltreatment, abuse. And they wanted to know what was that special ingredient that made some children, become assets to society. And then you had the other population that became the drug addicts and flunked out of school. So they wanted to kind of delineate what made this group different than that group. And they started looking at this concept of resiliency to determine if certain traits, what was it about resiliency specifically that made this person have a more positive spin on their experience and become assets to society, and why was this group likely to fail. And so resiliency kind of evolved from those types of studies, and now we're looking at resiliency with adults. We're looking at resiliency in marriage. We're looking at resiliency in dealing with stress, in dealing with divorce, in dealing with illness, in dealing with being a caretaker of someone with Alzheimer's, for example. So it's kind of broadened its scope over the years.
So I guess it's fair to say that the more resilient an individual is, the more apt they are to be able to handle a stressful situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you find that people who are not as resilient are physically not doing as well, i.e. colds, flu, sick, constantly just not sort of being under the weather? Is that a would that be fair to say? Or
yeah, I think I teach college psychology, and I've noticed that around midterms, around final exams, there's an explosion of viruses and flus and problems like that. It's not an accident. When we are stressed, when our bodies are stressed, when we're emotionally stressed, it compromises our immunity system. And Kate, you would agree with that. The stress doesn't make us sick. It compromises our ability to fight bacteria infections and that sort of thing. So yeah, if you can be more robust, emotionally robust, if you increase your ability to cope, if you learn to cope better with those stressful circumstances, yeah, it will ultimately reduce your incidence of colds and flus and viruses. So that mind-body connection is very, very powerful and undeniable as far as I'm concerned.
So let me ask you a question. When I wasn't diagnosed yet. This happened in August of '04. When they were trying to determine what was wrong, because the only thing that was obviously not right was my sight. Every physician that I met with asked me if I was under stress. Finally, when I was diagnosed with Leber's, one of the physicians explained to me that under a stressful, with extreme stress, this is when something genetic could come out. Now, I think that I am a resilient person. It's funny. I guess I'm trying to formulate my question, but I am a resilient person. Apparently, I must have been under stress. So is it? I guess the question is are there times when you are feeling so stressed, but because you might be resilient, you're able to sort of handle the stress, but somehow, if there's something going on genetically, you can't fight that? Do you know what I don't know if I formulated the question properly, but do you understand what I'm...
Are you asking that can you be a resilient person and still succumb to illness?
I guess that's the...
Yeah, and that's a complicated question. It certainly is possible that you have a genetic predisposition, let's say for schizophrenia, and we know that the first psychotic breaks with schizophrenia happens in college, freshman and sophomore year of college, and that's no accident either. Probably the most stressful time in a young person's life is freshman year of college. You're adjusting. So you're being bombarded with a lot of transitions, a lot of stressful circumstances that you need to cope with. So you have the genetic marker for schizophrenia, and then you have this stressful environment that may bring it out. So yeah, and even resilient people have moments of low self-efficacy where they don't feel that they can deal with something, or maybe they're, you know, this thing comes from left field and they weren't prepared. So yes, you can be highly...
Is there a correlation between how faithful a person is to how resilient a person is? Do you find that faith has anything to do with resiliency, or has a lot to do with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually reading a study on emotional quotient, which is emotional intelligence versus IQ, which is, you know, more intellectual. Emotional is more interpersonal. And they looked at how religious or how faith-based a person's life, whether they went to church, whether they believed in God, whether they prayed at home. And people who were more connected to God, not necessarily going to church, but praying and being faith-based in the way that they function in their lives, they did better. They had higher EQ, or an emotional quotient, compared to people who weren't so religious or so, you know, faith-based in the way they live their lives.
I hate to do this right at this second, but we're going to have to take a break. But I would hold that thought, because I want to come back to this. So thank you, ladies. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone. We're back with Kate and Fatima. Welcome back. I don't want to lose this thought, because you were talking about faith, and I just wanted to say a little bit about it from my own perspective. But you cannot be resilient without having faith, and obviously that's a personal opinion. But I do feel that faith sort of helps everything, and without my faith, I would not be able to be resilient. So I asked you about whether it's learned, whether you're born with it. I think faith is a huge component of resiliency. What do you think, Kate?
Well, I certainly think the spiritual aspect of people's lives is a very important component, and it has a lot to do with their health and their emotional health and their physical health. I think as a holistic doctor, we tend to think of a pot, and you put lots of things in that pot. What emotional baggage you have, your mental stress, your physical stress, your infection, your parents, your genes, everything's in the pot, and what makes the pot boil over so that you get this condition is sometimes what we associate with the condition, but it really has to do with all these things too. So fixing all of these things, maybe not even that thing that you associate it with, is maybe a more balanced approach to looking at resiliency as parts of all of those things. I myself am a breast cancer survivor, and that experience, I know I want to say a lot of things about what actually provoked that diagnosis, but I think it was many things, including some environmental exposures I had as a child and even into adulthood, a lot of emotional problems I was dealing with, a lot of resentment I was dealing with at that time in my life, lots of job stress, very poor nutrition and poor exercise. I was a holistic doctor, but I call myself the fake holistic doctor because I didn't do any of the things I told my patients to do. And I had to get breast cancer.
At least you admitted it.
Not then I didn't. Well, I guess I did, but now I certainly had reason to change. But I think that, you know, once I was diagnosed, I then developed this mantra of, you know, decrease exposure and increase prevention. That just seemed to me the way to look at things, whether it was dietary, whether it was emotional, whether it was mental, physical. I was going to stop the bad exposures and increase everything that I could do preventively. And in terms of spiritual things, I found astrology, I found Abraham, I found lots of things that for me, for my new age way of thinking, were very supportive and affirming for me and got me out of the negative head of, oh, what did that doctor say about my prognosis? Because I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to instead say in my mind, but you're not like all those other people. You do these things, and therefore that's not you.
Well, you know, people are always saying, oh, everything happens for a reason. Oh, things happen the way they're supposed to. As simplistic as that sounds, the person who really, really believes things happen for a good reason, everything is meant to be this way, is the person that is truly resilient. And the reason why I say that is, believe it or not, I wake up every morning and I thank God that I have levers. I consider it a blessing.
I've heard you say that many times.
I consider everything that happens to me in my life a blessing, because it might be intended to take me from here to here instead of here. So it's the person that opens their heart and their soul up to thinking. I guess what I'm trying to say is you can't think, why did this happen to me? You have to really feel like, okay, what's next? And you have to be open to what's next.
I think you might want to think about why only in the non-judgmental sense of what can I fix.
Sure.
So
yes.
you could do that.
The lesson is important.
Yes.
So I don't mean to. I don't intend to say ignore the lesson. The lessons are important, but then learn the lesson, and then.
In order to be proactive.
That's right. And that's very important. Proactive is very important. Taking action is very important. I think it's the people who are not so resilient are the people who are inactive.
Right, right. And the opposite of resilience is a learned helplessness. And I think that oftentimes with medical conditions and mental health conditions, there are some of us who tend to lay down to the disease and succumb to it and surrender to it and become consumed by it rather than fight back and be, as Kate said, proactive. And I think what you did, Vicky, was very powerful. Rather than succumb to the illness, you used it as an opportunity for growth. And when I hear you say, thank God I have Leber's disease, I don't think you mean that in a macabre sort of way. I think you mean that this was an opportunity for you to open up all other doors and help others and help yourself in the process. And yes, that's resiliency too. Being proactive and taking control of your life and not succumbing and not being helpless to it.
But how hard is that in this society when, you know, the media, the TV, everything you read about, oh, unemployment, the wars, we'll never get out of this, there's another cancer, don't eat bread, don't eat this, don't eat that. There's so many negative messages, and you know, your little wheel in the back of your head that keeps going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, the sky is falling, is huge. It's huge. The time pressures in this society, and you know, the choices that you have to eat so much bad food and to breathe so much bad air, you know, it's very difficult, I think. So, you know,
Here's a tip: stay away from negativity.
Absolutely, I think that's so. People can make a choice to do that.
You make a choice. You make a choice in what environment to exist. You make a choice in what people to include in that environment.
Absolutely.
What your work environment is like, what your home environment is like, and the only way to remain positive, to be resilient, to be strong, is truly to cut the negativity completely. And that that's not, I don't mean to say people, although it includes people, but food, environment, you know, actively make a choice to have positive in your life, to have positive people, positive environment, positive foods, positive thoughts are so right. I'm sure you could speak hours about positive thoughts.
Yeah, and free will. I think we can't discount the power of free will. And I think oftentimes people forget that they have free will and the will to choose the right path or the wrong path, and that we have that power within us to choose properly and appropriately, and not deflect blame and say, well, it was the environment, or it was, you know, the sleeve of Oreo cookies that I ate, you know, for 12 years. We can't keep blaming it on other things. The time is now, and we can't change what we've done in the past, but we can change what we're doing now. And that type of mindset is also resilience.
How do you, the very first time that you see a patient, if you recognize in that patient the lack of resilience, how do you deal with it? Is it something that takes a very long time to deal with? Do you ever deal with it? How successful is it when you deal with it?
Yeah, that would probably be something, once you establish a relationship with a patient, it may take months, sometimes less, to kind of conceptualize where they're at mentally and emotionally, if there's a mood problem, a depression problem, an anxiety problem, an interpersonal problem. I don't always know where they are in terms of resiliency, but I do find out eventually. I try to facilitate that they develop that. I encourage positive thoughts. Again, cognitive behavior therapy. Love it. It works. It works great.
I have a question, and I know that it would take hours and hours to really go into, but let's say a parent is wondering, can I teach my child resiliency? What would you say to that?
Can I teach my child resiliency? Well, there's no formula or book that you can go buy and read and do. I think that when we love our children unconditionally, when we encourage pro-social behaviors, when we encourage them to be good people, to be kind people, to make good choices when they have this choice and that choice in front of them, we are teaching them to be resilient, that they have control over their lives, that they have a say, that they can question authority when it doesn't feel right to them, and raise strong children who are independent thinkers, that aren't swayed by the masses or the media or peer pressure. So
I guess that would be key, peer pressure. You know, at a young age, if you can at least teach children not to be swayed by peer pressure, it would perpetuate the... and I guess most importantly, I would imagine, teach by example. If you are a resilient individual, most likely you will have resilient children. Is that true?
Yeah. Role model parents are very effective, powerful role models for their children. They don't realize the power that they have over their children. But I oftentimes hear parents say, don't smoke, it's bad for you, and they're smoking a cigarette. So children do what you do, not what you say.
So I guess we can't expect our children to be courageous and strong and persevere if we don't.
But how empowering is it to just affirm, if you're affirming your child's good behavior and positive outlook and yes we can attitude, and every time there's an issue just, you know, yes we can do this, you know, that's also powerful for the parent.
Sure.
You know, to be, because positive messages attract positive energy. It's a very affirming and empowering way to be.
Yeah.
So if you can do it for your kid, a lot of times women will do things for their children that they don't even think of doing for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
you do it for your children, you'll be helping yourself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and positive parents beget positive children, just like anxious parents beget anxious children. So on the upside, yeah, the more we kind of model for them those behaviors we would like to groom in them, the more likely that is to happen.
There's a scary area of science now, very empowering but scary area called epigenetics. And what's happening now is we're learning that even the uterine environment is an environment that can affect the way children, their behavior as well as their physical development. And what's scary to me about that is that I think for women's health, that might be a place where we're going to see a lot of blame again. How come you were too anxious? How come you is not just drank alcohol, but you weren't behaving exactly appropriately to have a healthy child? And that's something that we're going to have to deal with in the near future.
You just brought up a fascinating topic, and I'm going to have to ask you to come back and speak to us about this, because I'm extremely interested in talking more about this. I wanted to thank you, ladies. Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. This was
You're welcome. It's fun.
extraordinary. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We'll see you back soon, I hope.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again on All About Health. And if you do have any topics that you would like to hear more about, please email us at info@studiovhealth.com. Thank you. See you next week.